Medfield TV, community shows.
I know, I'm just giving you your stage.
Oh, no,
I never crowd anybody.
I know they'd rather listen to you than me.
I never crowd anybody, all right?
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I know there were bets being laid just how late I would be. I was here a half an hour ago, so you owe me money. All right, I just ran the table. Are we okay, Rich? All right, well, this afternoon, we're going to review, remember, and also talk about the end of World War II, the end of World War II in Asia. Hiroshima, the bombing of Hiroshima, the anniversary of which was 3 weeks ago this Monday. Nagasaki, 3 weeks ago this coming Wednesday. So we're right on target. We're right on a calendar schedule to have an interesting conversation. And even today, right down to this afternoon, the issue of bombing, using atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki still remains a topic of conversation, doesn't it? And I need to preface my remarks this way, that Japanese historians, in the last 10 or 15 years, have come to the conclusion that the bomb saved not only American lives, that it saved Japanese lives as well. Because as you all know, that every Japanese subject, not citizen, had taken a personal oath of loyalty to the Emperor Hirohito, to die at his post and to die at her post, whether one was a civilian or in the military. And not to do so was to bring shame to yourself. And shame is different than embarrassment. Shame is internal. Guilt, other people make you feel guilty. Shame is internal. And that the American intelligence in the months leading up to the preparation for the invasion of the Japanese home islands, MacArthur, Operation Downfall, they had picked up the Japanese slogan for resistance. When the Americans come, and they're coming, there's no doubt about it. And the slogan for resistance was 100 million people die proudly. We will not surrender. Japan has never been invaded. We will not surrender. 100 million people die proudly. And we know that, that Roosevelt had been talking with his generals about the possible numbers of fatalities and casualties. And the numbers were all over the place, weren't they? 250,000, 500,000, 1 million plus, no one knew. And that was even more frightening because no one knew. I mean, the numbers were so disparate. They were so scattered. And Roosevelt didn't have the bomb yet. Roosevelt did not even know the bomb could be tested successfully. That came on the Harry Truman watch. And of course, Harry Truman never hesitated for a moment, did he? At the moment when he gave the order, and also late in life when he confided to us in his diaries that I did the right thing, and as he said, it saved American lives. Only later on in the revisions was the addition made that it saved Japanese lives as well. No one gave a rat, frankly, about Japanese lives. They were positively demonized in this country and among the armed forces as well. So we're looking at a story here that has a rich and textured narrative, and we've just begun it, haven't we? 100 million people die proudly. My dad was scheduled to be part of that invasion force, and I was one of many children, and he would always say, Gary, particularly if you were cross about something, and he never was. He just had a wonderful sense of humor. We're talking about the bomb and so forth. He said, if I had gone ashore in Japan in the invasion, the Operation Downfall, you might not be here today. And I always said to him, I volleyed right back over the net. I said, and what a loss that would have been for you and Mother. You know, and we both roared, and that was the end of whatever disagreement there was, a little tension. It just disappeared in that. Then what a loss that would have been. He knew it was coming. I knew it was coming. It was the way the whole situation was immediately diffused. And so I just wanted to share that with you briefly. Our story begins our story does not begin in Los Alamos just yet. I want to bring us to Los Alamos. Our story, our narrative, begins in 1939. Albert Einstein, we all know, the world knew that name, Albert Einstein. That's where the phrase long hair came from. You know, a scientist, an intellectual, you know, someone who had to, until Velcro came around, was unable to tie their shoes. And Albert Einstein sent a letter. He sent a letter as a private citizen from New Jersey. He sent a letter to Franklin Roosevelt. And the letter was uncomplicated. It was not a scientific formula. The letter was simply a letter to Roosevelt reminding him, you know, that the Germans were doing good work, that they were doing good work, that the cutting edge work was being done on splitting the atom, and whether or not, what kind of power would be created, would be generated by splitting an atom and getting a multiple, multiple explosions going. And Einstein said, you know, you don't have a program here. And I think it can be done. It's theoretical physics. I think it can be done. That's Einstein. I think it can be done. And if it can be done, I think it could take out an entire city or an entire fleet. You don't have a program yet. So to shorten the story, you know, that Roosevelt finally paid attention to the threat, and he gave it to one of his military aides, a General Pa Watson. And from that will come the Manhattan Project, you know, which is the project, you know, to build the atomic bomb. And, you know, I always wonder, why was it called the Manhattan Project when so much of the work was done in Los Alamos or MIT, the University of Chicago, and Oak Ridge, and it always puzzled me. And, I mean, I didn't lose sleep over it, you know. But the first meeting, the organizational meeting, was held on Manhattan Island, and hence the Manhattan Project. So now it makes sense. And I want to share that with you as well. But at that meeting, chairing the meeting, was General Leslie Groves. Now, Groves was in charge of the military piece. And going around the table, they were looking for names, who to head up this project, who's good, who's hot, you know, a physicist, an American physicist to head up this project, to recruit a team. And the name Einstein popped up several times, as you might expect, but Einstein wanted no part of it. You know, I'm not a paperwork guy. I'm a loner. I don't want to have to deal with cranky employees and that sort of thing. And Einstein just pushed it away. I sent you the letter. You've acted on it. At least you've taken the heads up. The name that kept popping up was Robert Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer. And Leslie Groves, of course, he's a military guy. And Leslie Groves was a doer and a planner. He brought in the Pentagon. That's why he headed up the Manhattan Project. Groves brought in the Pentagon ahead of schedule and under budget. I mean, he was a terror. And we get it done now, and we work at 9 to 5, and nobody bangs in sick, period. I'm a doer. So he's in charge of the Manhattan Project. And the name Oppenheimer keeps coming up. So he calls for give me the FBI file on Oppenheimer. I want to check him out. So he gets the FBI file on Oppenheimer, looks it over, slams it shut, and says, absolutely not. No way. Oppenheimer? He's a communist. You know, he works on the West Coast. He works in UCLA, Berkeley. All his associates are communists. His wife is a former member of the Communist Party. Well, former. No, there's no such thing as a former member of the Communist Party. It's like being a former rabbi. I mean, you're always a rabbi. or a former priest. You're always a former priest. Or a nun. You're always a nun. His brother, Frank, is a card-carrying member of the Communist Party. Absolutely not. Oppenheimer wanted the job. He wanted the job because he was a patriot. He wanted the job because he had studied in Germany, in the German universities, theoretical physics, and he knew how good these Germans were. And he also knew, and this now was in Roosevelt's mind and Truman's, that if Hitler gets the bomb, he wins this war. No doubt about it. And we don't even have a program up and running. So the program was turned over to Oppenheimer, and Oppenheimer recruited his staff. And just one more thing about Oppenheimer and Groves. See, as I said a moment ago, Groves, we work 9 to 5. Nobody bangs in sick. And you have to sign in and sign out. And you need to be accountable. And Oppenheimer had trouble with Groves over that. Scientists do not work 9 to 5. They don't punch in and punch out. They're artists in their own way. They have an aha moment. They get up at 2 a.m. in the morning and they need to get in. They have an aha moment. They've got a number in their head. They want to run a program. And they quarreled over that. And Oppenheimer reminded him that, when Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel, and the guys are up on their ladders, Michelangelo didn't say, hey, fellas, 4 o'clock, clean your brushes, down the ladders. It's Friday afternoon, we're going to go for wine and pizza. I know a good place right next to the Vatican. We work, we come and go, and we don't salute. And from now on, General, and this ended it, from now on, General, if you have a question for me, ask me in Latin, and I'll answer in Greek. Now, he could pull that off. And when he can pull that off, you shut everything down. Oppenheimer was brilliant. You've asked me to do a job. Leave me alone. I'll get it done. And on July 16th, 1945, we're ready to test. And no one knew whether or not it would work. See, it was on the blackboard. Theoretically, all those numbers equal boom. All those equations, all those wiggles equal boom. But nobody had done it before. And it's July 16th. It's game day. We're going to test these things. We're going to test it today. And, the scientists were nervous. They were excited. It was like their first date. It's like Christmas Eve. They were excited. They were excited about this. And they're laying bets. Gentlemen, place your bets. Place your bets. Will this work? How powerful will it be? Gentlemen, place your bets. Israel Robbie. Gentlemen, place your bets. We're coming up to 5:30. It's game day at 5:30. And some guys bet it's not going to work. It's a dud. It will not work. It only works on the blackboard. So we got 4 megatons, 5 megatons, 7 megatons, whatever. And Israel said, everybody on? Everybody in? Everybody in? Betting part is closing. Anybody? You're not in yet. I'm taking the high number. It's like, the Price is Right. You make the high number. He cleared the table. He won the bet. And they're ready to go. And before they test it, of course, and it's on a tower. You can visit it, by the way. You can visit the site. I haven't. I have no need to visit it. But maybe you're looking for something to do over the weekend. There are 2 times of the year that you can visit the site. The first Saturday in April, you miss that. And the second Saturday in October. And if you're pregnant, anybody expecting? Anybody want to be expecting? You're advised not to go because it's still a little hot in the area. All these years later. These guys are excited. They've placed their bets. And they're asking, do you think we should put on sunglasses? Yeah, I think you should. It's going to be big and bright and hot and loud. We have sunglasses. In fact, I'm going to put on welding goggles. Good idea, Oppie. Good idea. A lot of heat. A lot of heat. Suntan lotion? Excellent. I can't make this up. I cannot make this up. They put on suntan lotion. Oppie, can you get my forehead? I got one of those high foreheads because I do a lot of thinking. I've lost my hair. Can you get me? Oh, I got you. And they're all ready to go. And Leslie Groves is there. It's all wired up. It's a laboratory test. There's no wind, there's no rain, there's no lightning, it's a clear blue sky. And someone posed the question to Oppenheimer also, if it works, it will work, sir. If we get a chain reaction going and we can't stop it, will the sky catch on fire? Will the atmosphere catch on fire? Geez, I hadn't thought about that. I mean, to me, that would be a logical concern. Are we going to get a chain reaction going and the atmosphere catches on fire? I hope not. I don't think we've got a garden hose that can reach it. I hope not. They all got ready, and it was more than they expected. I mean, it blew out windows 25 miles away. You know, people that were outside, maybe going to work or hanging laundry, they got a blast of heat. And they described it this way. It felt like on Thanksgiving when you open up the oven and you get a quick blast of heat because you're checking the turkey, there's a blast of heat went through. And a mushroom cloud, 20, 30, 35,000 feet in the air, all the beautiful colors, fuchsias and limes and greens. Ma, what was that? And the switchboard lit up. Nothing to worry about, ma'am. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about. An ammo dump blew up. Wow. Well, all my windows were blown out. That's why I have insurance. Thank you for calling. Bing. Nothing to worry about. And of course, back then people believed the government, didn't they? I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. Run for your life. Run for your life. I'd rather trust my neighbor. I have nice neighbors. And when it was over, and the heat passed, and the debris cloud passed, and the wind subsided, Oppenheimer got up and brushed himself off and, whoa. Gentlemen, today we are sons of bitches. We can't use this on people. Leslie Groves got up, brushed himself off. The war's over. How many more you got of these? Well, we got 3. We tested 1, we got 2 left. Thank you very much. It was always a 2-bomb operation. And waiting for the Hiroshima components, you know, Captain Charles McFay aboard the heavy cruiser Indianapolis. And that's another story, you know, for another afternoon, the sinking of the Indianapolis, the most disastrous maritime incident in the history of the United States Navy. And it was completely covered up for decades, But that's another narrative. And waiting at Tinian Island, Paul Tibbets and his crew, the B-29, and the Enola Gay, named after his mother. And also waiting at Tinian Island was Chuck Sweeney, local boy from Milton, and his crew, you know, waiting for some sort of new weapon that he was going to drop. They had no idea what they had. All they knew that over there in those Quonset huts were weapons that might end the war. That's all they knew. You know, and as Tibbets and Sweeney said, we've never seen so many scientists, so many admirals. This little island is going to sink under their weight. And what we're going to carry just might end the war. Now, Truman is going to give the order to proceed. This is Harry Truman. It's always a 2-bomb operation. Again, the 100 million people die proudly. See, the Japanese, as the American forces closed in on the Japanese home islands, the resistance became fiercer and fiercer. 1/4 of all casualties in the Pacific occurred at Okinawa, a few hundred miles from the Japanese home islands. Okinawa was seen as being part of Japan. You know, it's like Martha's Vineyard, you know, being part of Massachusetts. You know, when I mention to students about the invasion of the Japanese home islands, you know, I mean, I know what they're thinking. I can read they're thinking, 250,000, 1 million, 1.5 million to invade an island? I know what they're thinking. They're thinking Nantucket is what they're thinking. I said, look at a map The Japanese home islands stretch from Maine to Florida. You know, when you extend them, we're not talking about Martha's Vineyard. We're talking about a full-scale invasion, and the Japanese resistance was incredibly. In fact, the officers called it prairie dog warfare. In other words, hiding in a cave, digging in a hole and popping up behind you and shooting you in the back. It's going to be prairie dog warfare. They're going to be everywhere. And everyone will be armed and dangerous. To die for the emperor, Hirohito, Truman. Truman was in Potsdam, Germany, you know, talking about the end of the war. The war in Europe had ended in May. And it was such a feverish activity to bring the boys home from the Pacific as well. And Truman's meeting with Churchill, and he's meeting with Stalin, and he knows the test is coming. And he receives that top secret cable. It's been successful. And he mentions to Stalin, I've just received a cable that we have a brand new weapon, and we think it may end the war, and it'll save Soviet lives as well. The plan was that MacArthur would invade from the south, and with a force 4 times the size of D-Day, which pleased MacArthur. I mean, I've got the mother and father of all invasions, and it's mine. Dug out Doug, 5-star MacArthur. Truman had no use for him. Mr. Brass Hat. And when Truman mentioned to Stalin, there may not be any need for an invasion by the Soviets coming from the north. You know, the old hammer and anvil, you know, the hammer and the anvil, that's a military term. And Truman was puzzled that Stalin wasn't interested. That didn't seem to express any surprise. I mean, later on he knew that Stalin already knew. The Manhattan Project had been severely compromised by agents in the employ of the KGB. Klaus Fuchs, to name one anyway. That's another story for another afternoon. You know, we can go on until, let's see, what is this, August? We could probably get to the first of the year and take a quick break for a sandwich and a bathroom break and just keep right on rolling. How much film you got there? Plenty? Okay. Truman, you may want to read this. Truman sends a very terse telegram to the Japanese military, and it's called the Potsdam Declaration. It's 13 paragraphs. By the way, you can read the Einstein letter as well. I mean, there's no math in it. It's just, hey fella, you don't have a program. You better get cracking. The Potsdam Declaration to the Japanese is to the point that unless you surrender, you can expect, and here's the phrase, prompt and utter destruction from the air. The Japanese dismissed it. Just more B-29s. You know, American aircraft were flying at will, you know, over Japanese cities, which leads me to the choice of targets. As early as January 1945, you know, the targets were taken off a target list. You know, if this thing works and we can use it to end the war, we want to set aside certain cities. Curtis LeMay was in charge of the air campaign over Japan. And he was told in January of 1945, take a half a dozen cities off the target list. If they haven't been bombed, don't bomb them. Because if we use this thing, the gadget, it was nicknamed the gadget. Oppenheimer called it the gadget. You know, sometimes when you give something a nickname, it doesn't harm you. My grandmother, Margaret, nicknamed everything. She was neurotic anyway, you know, but she nicknamed everything. Everything had a nickname, from the stove to the kettle to the car, everything. The dishwasher, crazy lady. And I know this because she raised me and my brother for 4 or 5 years. It was unbelievable. But the only woman who allowed us to have ice cream for breakfast. You boys were meant to be loved. You can have whatever you want, round the clock. Just don't take the brownies when they come out of the oven. I count them, and she did. But I don't want to digress here. We got to keep going. So LeMay is told, take targets off the target list. And he circled Hiroshima, leave it up. We want a virgin target. We want a target that's has not been hit so we can assess properly the damage. We don't want to have to separate out collateral damage from prior damage from this damage. So Hiroshima is off the list. Number 2, Kokura is off the list. Now, Kokura. Number 3, Nagasaki was off the list, and it went down from there. Tokyo was never on the list. We'll firebomb Tokyo, but if we kill the emperor, they'll never surrender. We'll firebomb Tokyo. So up goes Tibbets, and they have to, they need to refit the bomb bay so the bomb will fit in. And as they're heading to the target, of course, they're concerned. I wonder if it'll clear the bomb bay door. I mean, we've done the specs, we've done the measuring. We've taken out the acetylene torch and we make some cuts. But in a real bombing raid, we're 10 hours in the air, and this is jiggling around. Is this going to clear the bomb bay door? That's what war's all about, right? And as they approach the Japanese coastline, I can hear it now. Tibbets on the intercom. Arm the weapon. Arm the weapon. 10 minutes to target. 10 minutes to target. Arm the weapon. And the photograph, not the photographs, the illustrations of these guys inside the plane, they're sitting on the bomb. They're sitting on it. Now, when the Lord said, "Let there be light," this is probably what happened. Boom! They're sitting on it in their shorts, wiring this thing up. Now, if it were me, they say, "Gary, you got the blueprint upside down. You're putting the red with the green. You're going to blow us up. You wire it red to yellow." Oh, no, I knew that all along. I was just testing you, Joe. Tibbets is told, when you drop this thing, get out fast. Throw the yoke over, because we have no idea how it's going to work in a military situation. It might come off the ground so quickly. It might rip the wings off the plane. When you drop it, do not hang around and gawk at it. Get out. And he threw that yoke over, and that blast, it buffeted the plane. They could hear, it was whining and screaming, and those rivets want to break out, and they're looking back in the rearview mirror. They didn't have a rearview mirror. I made that up. And holy, and it's not spinach. What was that? Goodbye, Hiroshima. And no one knows how many people died. The initial number was 140,000. But again, over the years with radiation sickness and so forth, and people just disappeared. They were turned into X-rays against the side of a building. They just disappeared. Tibbets is back. Sweeney goes. Up goes Sweeney. Sweeney's target is Kokura. And he has a problem over Kokura. And what saved Kokura was weather. 10 minutes to target. 10 minutes to target. Arm the weapon. It's ready, skipper. It's ready, captain. Here we go. And bombardier, bombs away, bombs away. I can't get a sight. Too much cloud cover. And Sweeney, Tibbets, got his target on the first run. It's a guy thing. It's a guy thing. I'm going to get my target. He got his, I'm going to get mine. So he made a big arc. He came back, cloud cover. Came back, cloud cover. That saved Kokura. What's our next target? Hiroshima. Do we have enough fuel? I think so. I'm going to get my target. And it's bombs away Nagasaki. And as Sweeney, pulls out and begins to head back to, he's got a 10-hour flight. And I don't have enough fuel. We're not going to get back, guys. I don't have enough fuel. We exhausted so much fuel circling Kokura. And he put his hand in his pocket, and I remember, because I was his co-pilot, I remember that he had in his pocket poison, cyanide pills. And because he was concerned, if we don't get back and we have to ditch, and we get captured by the Japanese. I want to make sure if my guys want to take their lives, I've got pills for them. And as he remembered years later, I went, it's like a MASH unit, I went into the tent, and I said, doctor, where are the cyanide pills? I want some for the mission. They're over there, Chuck, help yourself. Can you imagine that today? I think I got enough. Different days, aren't they? Yeah. Different days. Captain Sweeney, we don't have enough fuel to get back. Now, these planes carry 8,168 gallons. Now, I know that because I don't have a life. All right, I'm not making that number. 8168, 8,168 gallons. Now, one would think you could get back. We don't have enough fuel. Well, get a map. Get a map. Are there any alternative landing sites? Going over the map, remember, this is a top secret mission. And looking at the map, looking at the map, looking at the map, right here. And we can land here. It's an airfield. Problem is, Captain, the airfield isn't long enough to take a B-29. It'll only take a conventional bomber. We don't have enough airstrip to land. We're going to land. I'm Chuck Sweeney. I'm going to land this plane. Captain, it's 400 yards short. I'm going to land this plane, fellas. Make for the, the name popped out of my head, it'll come to me. Make for the island. Now, nobody knows they're out there. So he approaches the island, and, you know, Sweeney, permission to land, and who are you? Who are you? This is Boxcar, secret mission. Who are you? Who are you? Permission to land, permission to land. Running low on fuel, permission to land. He'd already lost one engine. It had just simply, I'm out of fuel. Permission to land, nothing. And as you said, after the war, they're thinking in the, he's talking to his co-pilot now. Maybe they think we're a kamikaze plane, you know, disguised as a big super fortress. And we're going to blow the island up. What if they shoot us out of the sky? So, I'm going to send out every distress flare that I have. It must have been beautiful. It looked like the 4th of July. And every flare has a different color, which designates a different problem. Shoot them all off. I got fire on board, wounded on board, dead on board. I'm out of fuel. I've lost 2 engines. Mayday, 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 maydays. Can't you hear me? I can see you. Mayday, 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 nothing. And as we're landing this plane, and he goes back, you guys, buckle up. This is going to be a rough landing. Buckle up. And as he's coming in, the fire trucks are moving in. You know, the ambulances are moving in. And he puts it down. It's a hard landing. He puts it down, blows all of his tires. The plane begins to spin like a top, and all these sparks are in the air, spinning and spinning and spinning. And it came to rest about 7 feet from the seawall. He would have been crushed like a tomato soup can. And can you imagine these guys getting out? Nice going, Captain. Nice landing. I think you need a refresher course. How much fuel is left? How much fuel is left? You ready for this number? 7 gallons. He went. 7 gallons were left. Nice landing, Chuck. Good job. He told that story. I met him, and he told that story many, many, many times. And he was proud of it. I got everybody back. We didn't ditch. And I asked him, what did you do with the pills? He said, I flushed them. I didn't want anybody to find them in my pocket. I just wanted them there. So the 2 missions are successful. And the Japanese refused to surrender. And the plans for the invasion continue. But the refusal to surrender doesn't last long. You see, the military wants to fight on. You know, the hotheads want to fight on. And what they had done, we all have tendencies, don't we? By that I mean, when you go to work, you park in the same spot. Typically, you get up at the same time. We all have tendencies. We're all predictable to some point. And the Japanese military knew that MacArthur had tendencies. They knew the invasion was coming. You know, Operation Downfall. You know, coming for the, let's see, for the late summer, early fall of 1946. And the expectation was it would probably take 14 to 16 months, you know, to button this thing up. And they put their finger right on the spot where MacArthur was going to land, on the southern tip of the Japanese home islands, right on Kyushu. He's going to land right here. And that was the plan. And we're going to have a goal line defense. Everybody up. Everybody up. You know, it's like the 7th game of the World Series. Everybody's out in the bullpen, even me. I can't strike anybody out. And he's going to land right here. But the Emperor got on the radio in August of 1914. The Army wanted to fight on. There were some who wished to assassinate the Emperor. 1945. Glad you're listening. And there you go. He's my brother. I always bring him here to keep me on target. And the Emperor got on the radio, and he relieved all Japanese from their oath to die for him. And that effective, and when that broadcast was made, you know, Harry Truman suspended all air campaigns over Japan. Japan was defenseless. American B-29s were simply, there was an 800 plane raid over Tokyo. I mean, they're dropping firebombs. They didn't lose a single plane. They were defenseless. And on September 2nd, 1945, Douglas MacArthur, you know, sailed into Tokyo Bay on board the USS Missouri. And he chose the Missouri because Harry Truman's from Missouri. And at that level of play, it's all politics, you see. And, you know, when you get to a certain level, it's politics as well. My brother's a brigadier general. And he doesn't call me doctor. I don't call him general. He's Lance, I'm Gary, okay? I knew you when, and I still know you. In fact, I had lunch with him yesterday. Good guy, good man, good guy. September 2nd, MacArthur, very formal surrender ceremony. Everything is laid out. And he tells the crew aboard the USS Missouri, when the Japanese diplomats, when the Japanese officers arrive, they will not be piped on board. There'll be no saluting. There'll be no handshaking. They're a defeated enemy. And I'm going to make sure that there are as many American naval ships in this harbor that we can squeeze in. So when they are brought aboard, looking 360, there's American military presence everywhere. And I want a flyby. They just flew by, didn't they? A flyby, 300 plane flyby right at 9 a.m. You know, as they sit to sign the surrender ceremony. I want this to be big, I want this to be pointed, and I want them to know you have been defeated. And the documents are signed, and MacArthur has the last word, doesn't he? You know, and his final words go across a suffering world. You know, World War II was the most cataclysmic event in world history. It only would have been superseded by an atomic weapon, an atomic bomb. And 20,000 people a day died during World War II. A day. And those casualty rates coming in from Okinawa, you know, that 1/4 of all Pacific fatalities were at Okinawa. And Truman, I don't want this invasion if I can prevent it. I don't want an Okinawa from one end of Japan to another. The bomb. Use it. And it's over. It's over. And it saved, as I mentioned at our opening, you know, tens of thousands of Japanese lives, you know, as well as hundreds of thousands maybe of Japanese lives, as well as American lives. And MacArthur had the last word. These proceedings are over. The war is over. And G.I. Joe is coming home to marry that gal he's been writing to for 3 years. G.I. Joe with the G.I. Bill and the veterans benefits and so forth. The war is over. We are coming home. But we know, don't we, that the hot war that ended in August of '45 was soon replaced by the Cold War. And Churchill giving voice to that, declaring that an Iron Curtain has descended across all of Eastern Europe. And behind that lie all the ancient capitals of Eastern Europe. And Stalin had turned Eastern Europe into a prison colony. His rule was grotesque. Roosevelt did not live to see it. Harry Truman did. And Truman was a very, very different man than Roosevelt. Very different man. Roosevelt's favorite color was gray. I'll think about it. Talk to me later. I'll see. Harry Truman was much more decisive. And I always like to remind folks of this. And Roosevelt would never have said it. That this is Harry Truman. That the only difference between Hitler and Stalin, the size of their mustache. Now, that's nailing it, isn't it? I mean, Roosevelt would never have said that. He was too indirect, too oblique. As I like to say sometimes, just to buy time, I'm uncomfortable with that question. That way I don't have to answer it. I'm uncomfortable with that question. Could you please change the question? That way I can bob and weave and duck and have plausible deniability. I never said that. I never said that. I never promised you that. I never did that. What are you talking about? You must have had that conversation with someone else. It wasn't me. I can be good at that. It wasn't me. Oppenheimer was so disturbed, troubled by the fact that, his face appeared on the cover of Time and Look and Saturday Evening Post and so forth, and his face, and either above the face or below the face, the phrase "father of the atomic bomb." I said, I don't want to be remembered as father of the atomic bomb. I did my job, my staff. I don't want to be known as the father of the atomic bomb. And it grieved him to some extent. I did my job. And shortly after, when the Russians exploded their first atomic bomb, which shocked the CIA is brand new in 1947. And Truman summoned Oppenheimer. I'd like to talk to him. So Oppenheimer came, and Truman said, Dr. Oppenheimer, I'd like you to build the sequel to the atomic bomb, so we can outshoot the Russians. And what became known as the Super. Is that Truman? What became known as the Super. And Oppenheimer said, Mr. President, I cannot build that. I have blood on my hands. Hiroshima, Nagasaki. And Truman thanked him for coming, and Dean Acheson came in, Secretary of State. And Truman said, Dean, never send that man back in here again. Never bring this man back in here again. He only built it. I used it. That's Truman. We need this thing. It's a national security issue. The Russians have caught up with us. A dozen years before the CIA expected it. We need something bigger, badder. And Edward Teller, who had worked on the Manhattan Project, Edward Teller said, I'll build it. But the problem Teller ran into is that when he tried to bring his team together, everyone wanted to know, is Oppion? Well, no, he's declined. Why has he declined? Oh, he has some qualms about building another bomb. He's such... And of course, the Cold War was on. And for Teller, I'm having trouble getting a team together. Oppenheimer is the ringleader. They all, they're all they're all around Oppenheimer. And I've got to get after Oppenheimer. And this comes back to that FBI report that Groves took a look at. And it's Teller who puts the bug in, who puts whispers into J. Edgar Hoover's ear. I think the reason that Oppenheimer does not want to build the Super is that he's a communist. He's a communist. This has nothing to do with morality. This has nothing to do with survival. I think he's a communist. And Hoover shared that with Eisenhower. And speaking of current events, Oppenheimer's security clearance was yanked. No longer to work on any part of any atomic project. Thinking about it, using it, preparing for, planning, arguing against it, whatever. Yank his security clearance. And it grieved. It grieved Oppenheimer that suddenly he's out of the loop, out of the circuit, that whatever influence he might have to leave his fingerprints or his thoughtfulness, his security clearance snapped, and the headlines, Oppenheimer, suspected communist. This is the Red Scare. This is the beginning of McCarthyism. And it killed him. It killed him spiritually. So there's our story for this afternoon. And it's our story, isn't it? It's our story. It's our narrative. And rarely do we have a chance to be able to, gather together and put it together in, 55 minutes or so, and take it from Einstein's letter to sudden death out of a clear sky. It's almost like if you want to build a bridge, and one way to teach this, an overarching bridge, is that the war began through the air at Pearl Harbor, and then it ended through the air at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I mean, there's your bridge, if you want to build it. And under that bridge is the American Navy, and flying over that bridge is our B-29s, the Super Fortress. So let me stop there. Maybe a question? Anybody have a question? An observation? Anybody there? Yes?
How many of them were spies?
Pardon me?
How many of the Oppenheimer team were spies?
At Los Alamos?
Yes.
Oh, there were dozens, many of whom simply were never detected. The lead spy was Klaus Fuchs, and Klaus Fuchs was a Brit in the pay of the KGB, and he's working the blackboard. He's working the blackboard with Oppenheimer and the others. So they were there. And the reason, Stalin wasn't surprised because he knew how close we were, and that he probably knew before Truman knew that it had been tested successfully. And again, it was always a two-bomb operation. And only Oppenheimer and a few scientists considered giving a demonstration blast. We've got 3, we've used one, bring out one for a demonstration blast, bring out the Japanese, put them on the deck of the ship and say, look over there, watch this, watch this. And it never happened for a number of reasons. A, payback for Pearl Harbor. And secondly, what if we move this thing all this distance and it doesn't work? We loosen up the diodes and the transistors and so forth, and we tell the Japanese, now watch this, fellas. Watch this. Watch right over there. And it's ready. Everybody ready? You watching? And nothing happens. Now what do we do? So, no. What if it fails? They deserve it. They deserve it. They're beasts. They've been demonized. You look at the propaganda posters, and depicting the Japanese, and then depicting, the Germans and the Italians. They're very, very different. For a Brit, an Austrian American to surrender to the Japanese, you've lost all respect. You are a soldier. You die at your post, and you save the last round for yourself. To surrender is to lose all respect. The survival rate in a Japanese POW camp was about 1 in 3. To surrender to the Germans, it was about 7 or 8 out of 10. The Italians, they never locked the doors. You'd rather surrender to the Italians, than to the Japanese or the Germans. So there we have it. I'm going to. Yes.
How close were the Germans to coming up?
They were. Good question. How close were the Germans? They had gone down so many dead ends. They were not close at all. But Roosevelt and Franklin had to believe they were close, because otherwise you're being careless. This is a national security issue. They weren't close at all. They'd gone down so many dead ends. And there's some evidence to support the fact that some of the German physicists did deliberately bad science to slow it down, because these Nazis couldn't figure it out, but to slow it down. And of course, there were a couple of bombing raids over a facility that made heavy water, which is necessary. I'm not sure what's the difference between heavy water and light water. I just want my shower to run, all right? So they weren't even close. Yes, please.
Did you read the book Unbroken?
Did I read the book Unbroken? Yes.
Yes, and
Yeah.
I was surprised by the
Here.
brutality. I was surprised by the brutality
Oh, sure.
of the Japanese.
You have lost all respect.
Right, and they were concerned that even if the Americans came in and basically were winning the war, that they were going to be killed because the Japanese were going to kill themselves, for honor and so forth. So obviously, the
Sure.
Japanese were
Sure, it's all there.
Yeah.
It's all there. In fact, when negotiations were begun to surrender, the Japanese were looking to, they wanted to surrender to the Russians. I mean, Stalin declared war on Russia on Japan 3 days after, maybe even 2 days after Hiroshima. He wanted a piece of that action. He was expanding everywhere. The Japanese wanted to surrender and to get terms. For example, there'll be no occupation. For example, there'll be no war trials. For example, that we'll be able to keep Korea, Taiwan, parts of China that we've overrun. And all of that, you've been defeated, defeated, defeated. There were a whole series of war trials in the Asia. It's the other Nuremberg. We all remember the Nuremberg trials. But there were a whole series of war trials as well in Asia at different points in the Pacific Theater. And most Americans, if you would poll them, wanted the emperor hanged as a war criminal. MacArthur saved the emperor's life. But the Japanese will be more docile if we save the emperor's life and allow him to remain as a symbol. And MacArthur made that offer to the emperor. And he said, you got to do two things. Well, actually, you have to do 2 things. And I will spare you the hangman's noose. You needed 2 things. You need to get back on the radio. You got to get back on the radio. And you have to say now that you are no longer divine. You got on the radio and it told the Japanese to surrender. Now you got to get back on and tell them you're no longer divine. That must have been tough. I'm no longer a god. I'd have a problem with that. You put your pants on one leg at a time. And the second thing, that you need to be public. You need to put on a 3-piece suit and be public and be available to the Japanese people, to be at ribbon cutting ceremonies. It was so. You look at the photographs of the film of Emperor Hirohito, greeting the public, and the public, he's our god. It was, if everybody's so awkward, it's almost cartoonish. There's a book. It's a historical novel. It's by Julie Otsuka, O-T-S-U-K-A or O-U-T-S-K, and it deals with the title. Very short, and the title is When the Emperor Was Divine, and it talks about back home. Back in the United States, with the detention camps, and she tells the story from different points of view, father, mother, children. It's interesting. Students will read it. You can read it at a red light. It's about 100 pages, but it's an interesting historical novel. Yes, sir. I'll walk over to you.
My brother was a ball turret.
Here, you want to use this? A ball turret gunner?
My brother was a ball turret gunner in the 5th Air Force. That was the Air Force that ultimately bombed. He wasn't a participant in the raids, but he went over afterwards.
Yeah.
And the amazing part about it, here's a ball turret gunner, if you can picture some of these airplanes. And he ended up a typist in the Meiji building in Tokyo, which was MacArthur's headquarters.
Yes.
And he said MacArthur was the most egotistical man that he could ever imagine.
Sure.
And
which is true.
What he loved was, MacArthur loved, he didn't even want guards around him, because when he walked down the street, the Japanese bowed at the waist. and he just ate it up. My brother almost knocked him over coming through the revolving door one time, and he got chewed out for it. But another thing I wanted to mention was, I was over there during the Korean War in both Nagasaki and Hiroshima. A lot of people don't know the
Right.
exact.
It's like, you know, Caribbean, stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I was interested. I noticed that somebody notified Obama that the correct pronunciation when he was over there was Hiroshima, and he said it exactly. But even then, those people, 7 years after the cities had been leveled, as you walk down the street in uniform, they bowed to you. It was just embarrassing for most of us.
Sure. Well, you know, and MacArthur was perfect for the Japanese. He was an American Caesar. Perfect for the Japanese. And speaking about his ego, his wife Jean, she must have suffered. MacArthur had a habit of speaking about himself in the third person. You know, one would be at a meeting with MacArthur, and he would say, MacArthur believes, MacArthur's of the opinion, MacArthur suggests. You're sitting right there. You're MacArthur. I had a teacher, third grade teacher, who did that. Very puzzling when you're 8 years old. You know, would you please bring Miss McDevitt the crayons? You are Miss McDevitt. Very puzzling. Very, very puzzling. Jean would, he preferred when she addressed him in the third person also. Would the general like, and he liked scrambled eggs, you know, would the general like more scrambled eggs? Would the general like another cup of coffee? Well, I'd like for that, you know, some gal say, would the professor like a little more dessert? Would the professor like a little bit of another round of another little bit of white wine? That doesn't happen. It's, hey, you, dude, what do you want?
I was wondering.
Here, you want to use this?
Okay, thank you. I heard at one time that in the conditions that the United States put on Japan, you know, if the surrender was to give women rights in Japan.
What's the first part of that sentence?
The part of the conditions on the United States that the United
In terms of the surrender?
States put on them,
Yeah,
was
okay.
and the Japanese, was that they were to give women rights in Japan. Is that true?
The part of that is true. There's a whole thing I do on MacArthur and the occupation policy. He really, I mean, MacArthur he democratized Japan, didn't he? He brought in baseball. In fact, he ordered thousands of gloves, bats, and baseballs because it used to be played in Japan, still is. But then the war got in the way. You know, Coca-Cola showed up. And he also that women would go to college and school, and they did not have to walk 10 steps behind their husband, you know, with the shuffle and the hands folded and the head down. There was a bit of a social revolution that went on. It's hard to change a culture after 2,500 years. It isn't like tap water. You know, you turn it on, you turn it off. Somebody else had a thought.
There's a culture difference there, and I realize that we rebuilt Europe after the war.
Yes, we did.
Was there anything equivalent to rebuilding?
Yes. Was there anything equivalent to rebuilding Japan? Yes, there was. It wasn't as bold, it wasn't as expensive, it wasn't as pricey as the Marshall Plan. But again, the Marshall Plan, the Soviets are right there in Eastern Europe. There was a little bit of a gap between Manchuria and Japan. There was, the major industries were broken up into competing groups. Land was provided at bargain basement prices to Japanese farmers. It was a major economic revolution. And we've got Japanese ball players, don't we?
Yeah, but it seems that they've done it on their own as opposed to the market.
No, there was no equivalent to the Marshall Plan, none whatsoever. Most of the attention during World War II was directed toward Europe, and you know, rather than toward the Pacific War. There's a. Have you read the book by William Manchester? It's called Goodbye Darkness. You know the name William Manchester? He died maybe 10 years ago. He wrote a book. It was therapy. It was called Goodbye Darkness: The Memories of the War. You know, post-traumatic stress disorder, and in order to jog his memory, he went back to some of those battlefields, and he went back to where he knew he had dug in, a foxhole. And one of the most chilling memories that he had that the Japanese were so good, so quiet, so quiet, that you'd be in the foxhole, and I'm here and you're over there, and in the morning, that guy's had his throat cut. This guy over here has his throat cut. I didn't. Is tonight my turn? That is a problem with trying to sleep that night, don't you think? Nobody heard a thing. There was no struggle, no commotion. So goodbye darkness, to get away from that dark memory, to go to those beaches, dig in, smell the rotten vegetation and the trees and so forth, the rotting of the trees. And it's an excellent book to be with him in remediation, you know, in therapy. There's so much good stuff out there, there really is. And I like to share it. So we're not going to stay till January. And there is no homework. And you're free to go. There's a poem, I've forgotten the author, it's called The Death of the Ball Turret Gunner. I think it's by a guy by the name of Randall. And it talks about the death of the ball. Am I right, Randall?
Yeah.
Something.
Randall Jarrett.
Randall Jackson, first name Randall. You must be a teacher.
No.
How do you know that? You're not supposed to know
I
that.
just like his poetry.
Poetry, okay. Good for you. I like to read poetry too, right? Thoughtful poetry, right? Poetry that at 3 a.m. you wake up and you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
Or you're reading, you put that book down on your chest and you reflect on those words. And it gets into the 3 a.m. of your soul. It's much better than watching The View.
I also read David McCullough's book, Killing the Rising Sun. It was absolutely...
That's not McCullough. Killing the Rising Sun is, help me.
Who was it?
I don't, you help me. It's not my,
I thought it was David McCullough.
no, not David
But
McCullough.
I read it anyway.
Yeah, okay,
It was
yeah.
wonderful.
It's Bill O'Reilly.
Yep.
Bill O'Reilly. Yeah, sure. He's got good stuff in there. The problem with him, he scatters, he's all over the place. And at the Ford Museum, where Lincoln was shot, they no longer, at least 5 years ago they didn't. One could not buy Killing Lincoln, because Bill O'Reilly's Killing Lincoln, because there were so many factual errors. So I just put that out there for you. Yes, again.
I heard an interesting note a few years back, which I thought was of interest, was that a lot of people did not know, very few Christians, obviously, in that area of the world. Nagasaki was the most Catholic city. And some, in fact, blame people here for bombing Nagasaki.
Sure.
We know that wasn't the case. But what was an interesting statistic, not statistic, point of information, the Bishop of Nagasaki was in his mother's womb when that bomb was dropped.
Life follows death.
Yeah.
And I know, I've heard that Truman bombed Nagasaki because he was a Methodist or whatever, and we have to get rid of Catholics. I mean, that's all. There's a good word for that. But this is a family show. I'll see you all later. I'll see you when, we're going to get together in October on something. I'll see you soon. Thank you for your company. Be well. It's our story. It's our story. And this is your microphone. And so, overnight.
Medfield TV, community shows.